you both come from First Christian Church in sort of a unique way. How long has your family been part of the life of this church?
I don't know. My grandmother was born in 1907, and so I assume at least 20s, 30s, something like that. So.
And then your
Close to
dad was
100
born into
years.
this church?
My dad was born in 51. His parents were a part of this church, and I've been here 62 years.
He wasn't born in 51.
No, he was born in 32.
There you go.
He graduated high school in 51.
Thank you. If he was born in 51, he had you at a very young age, young man.
He was born in 32.
Okay, Dori, how did you end up at First Christian Church?
Okay. How I ended up at First Christian Church is
They'll
that
manage it
the
up there.
church invited me to be the youth director and to start a youth program and Christian ed.
So you came out of
back in the
seminary.
early 80s.
You came out of seminary.
I came out of seminary way back in the early 80s.
And you came here as a single woman.
Yes.
And he was a single
And
man.
I left as a married woman.
How did you guys meet?
I was serving her communion the first Sunday she was here, and she looked to see if I had a ring on my finger.
But I'll finish that.
But I wasn't her type. She
Sit
was
down,
she was
sit
looking
down.
for a brown suit guy, and I was a blue suit guy.
So you guys were part of the life of the church here, eventually becoming a homemaker, if you will, and also you worked in the farm industry.
Yeah, I worked in outside sales for 20 years, from early 80s until early 2000s when we went to Kenya. Most of that was in agribusiness, calling on farmers. The last couple of years was calling on contractors.
And how did you make the decision, Dori, to go overseas?
That's a story. But I'll start. Lynn can start it because it actually starts with Lynn, and I'll finish.
When I was in university, I went to a missions conference called the Urbana Missions Conference, put on by our University Christian Fellowship. Billy Graham gave the keynote speech at that conference for many years. He gave a challenge to missions, and I told the Lord, I can do that. And then I went to work for 20 years. About 20 years later, I went to a youth Acquire the Fire conference as a chaperone with a group from this church. We went to the Pontiac Silverdome in Pontiac, Michigan. The youth director, some chaperones, and probably about 40-some middle and high school aged kids. There were probably 55,000 kids in the Pontiac Silverdome. There could have been nobody in there. The theme of that conference was basically the emphasis, what are you doing to make an eternal difference? And I won't say that I heard God audibly, but it was very strong. What are you doing to make an eternal difference? You told me 20 years ago that you would do such and such, and you've been in sales for 20 years, so that's kind of what started the conversation with Dori.
And so after that happened, the church here had a missions emphasis week in, I think it was April, and the church invited Gary and Judy Woods to come back and speak. So as I walked down this aisle with Judy at the end of the service, I said, Judy, I've always been interested in missions and maybe working with a missionary. And her jaw literally dropped, and she said, Dori, we have an opening on our team right now, and Lynn would be perfect for it. And so my heart just whoa, jumped out of my chest and started beating, and I thought, oh my gosh, we're going to go to Africa. And so we talked a lot with Gary and Judy that week, and they gave us two very wise words of wisdom. One of them was, don't come to Kenya to work with us. You have to know yourself that you're called to come. And the second one was, just ask God for clear black and white confirmation. And we did that also. And we had so many black and white confirmations, including selling our house at a basketball game, that we knew that we were going to Kenya.
So how long have you been in Kenya now?
18 and a half years.
What's your job? You actually lead the team, don't you?
I co-lead the team, right.
And how many missionaries do you have in your team?
Right now we have 10.
10. And what's your job there?
Work for her. Basically, my job is to When I went there, it was to oversee a church building construction program and development project. It still has a lot to do with that, but it's also teaching and training the Kenyan church leaders that we work with, because they're autonomous now. They run their own affairs, but it's training them to look at quotations, to help them manage projects more themselves, to do expense reports, those kind of things, and to establish some accountability with what we would consider what most Westerners would think of when they think of accountability. And then I also take care of a lot of the nuts and bolts stuff for our team. I buy and sell I don't buy and sell them, but take care of all the registration of all the vehicles that CMF owns in Kenya, et cetera, those kind of things.
What's the future hold, guys?
What does the future hold? Well, we will be returning on New Year's Day, and that's what the tickets are for anyway. And we have a couple things that we will be working towards. I'll let Lynn talk about a couple. We have started a child sponsorship program for high school students. And so if anyone is interested in sponsoring a high school student who normally could not go to school because all the schools are boarding schools, you can talk to me afterwards. And
She just finished the first batch of 20 students. They just graduated, and we're taking on another 20. As I mentioned, we're trying to raise up the level of communication with church leaders there, mostly so they can communicate with people and organizations, establish partnerships with organizations other than CMF and people that they may not know personally.
People may not know what CMF is.
Oh, Christian Missionary Fellowship. That's the organization that we are a part of. CMFI.org if you want to find out more about it. And then another thing that we're looking forward to, there's also a health ministries there that is very well established in one area where CMF has worked for probably 40-some years, primarily because the doctor that was on the team at the time and her husband that set up all the administration for Community Health Partners, or CHP, they lived in that area. The other area, that's the area that Gary and Judy served in when they were in Kenya for about 20 years, from the 80s through the early 2000s. That area is very much lacking in health care. And so we're hoping to establish a good, solid base clinic in that area in partnership with Community Health Partners. We've got an account set up to receive funds for that, and there's different phases. The first phase, to purchase land, get the land fenced, put in a borehole, what we call a well here in the States if needs to be. We're probably looking to raise about $150,000 for that phase, and perhaps over the next 5 to 10 years, as much as $800,000 to $1 million to get the thing going.
What's fascinating, friends, you guys can sit down, and we'll go from there. Okay? Can you thank him? Yeah. We're doing this on the fly. Okay, so what's fascinating is you may recall, there was a young man that Gary and Judy basically didn't quite take in their home, but almost, from the time he was a little boy at a year old, who we have partnered with that young man all the way through school and helped him get through school. And then you may recall in 2010, I was over in Kenya, and what do you want to do with your life, Daniel? I'd like to become a doctor. We raised the $60,000 here in our congregation. We put him through med school. He's now fully licensed. He's back in that same area, able to be the lead head of what Lynn and Dori are talking about. So it's all great news. And guys, I can't tell you how proud I am of the fact that you represent us over there so well. And what's driving me to bring this to you today is I wonder if there's a new Cazier story yet to come from the pews and the attendance rolls of our congregation.